Trump faces his fourth indictment, and I have a lot of questions. Fortunately, my guest today is representing a defendant named in the indictment, and I'm hoping he can give me some expert answers. Everybody, all that today and more on Speechless, The Daily Show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Speechless, The Daily Show. I am your host, Phares. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like what you see, don't forget to give me a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, put a comment down there. What do you think? I hope you're learning a lot today. Let me know what you learned, what you think about this indictment, and everything else that's going on, and share it with your friends so we can get this information out to the people. But as you guys may have heard, a Fulton County, Georgia grand jury returned a 98-page indictment on Monday night in the criminal investigation into former President Donald Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. The 41-count indictment charges 19 individuals, including Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and many more. Fulton County DA Fani Willis announced this Monday night, and I want to make sure we reference this exactly what she said later on when I talk to my guest. So everybody, let's just take a look at exactly what Fani Willis, Fulton County DA, said in her announcement.
The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result. Subsequent to the indictment, as is the normal process in Georgia law, the grand jury issued arrest warrants for those who are charged. I am giving the defendants the opportunity to voluntarily surrender no later than noon on Friday, the 25th day of August, 2023.
A criminal enterprise, and she's giving the defendants the opportunity to surrender no later than noon on this Friday. But get this, like she said, this is a criminal enterprise that they're charging Trump and everyone else with. You know, RICO laws that were meant to charge people like the Gambino crime family, Hell's Angels, the Latin Kings. That's what they're accusing Trump and these other 19 individuals for. Ironically, the same RICO-style prosecution was used on now defendant Rudy Giuliani in the 1980s to take down organized crime in New York. So that's kind of an interesting point there, but I digress. If you're anything like me when it comes to this whole indictment, a rational individual might not want to torture yourself with reading through all 98 pages of the indictment, and you might have a ton of questions about what all of this actually means. Questions like, what is Trump actually being charged with? Who are all these people in the case? Why is this case being charged through an organized crime legal style? Was Trump running a criminal enterprise? How was he running a criminal enterprise? Isn't the government itself just a criminal enterprise? I don't know. Well, fortunately, I have a guest today, and his name is David Shestokas, a frequent contributor to my show, as well as Cities 92.9 as a whole. David actually is representing Reverend Stephen Lee, named in the indictment. David, how are you doing today? I'm sure it's been stressful.
It's been at the very least hectic, Kevin. Ever since I woke up yesterday morning to find that Reverend Lee had been indicted as part of this criminal enterprise, as Fani Willis puts it. So it's been hectic ever since, and I'm certainly, in addition to dealing with my regular law practice and consulting with the Reverend on what we're going to do, and I actually started having some consultations with some of the lawyers for some of the other defendants today. Of course, the media is terribly interested in what's going on. So my inbox is full, and my voicemail is getting to where it's full, and people want to know. They want to know about the Reverend. They want to know some other commentary about what's going on with this. So it's a pretty it's been an interesting 60 hours or almost 48 hours now since that happened. So there's been a lot of motion about what's going on, but it's an incredible situation that they call it a 41 count indictment. That's kind of interesting. They also say 98 pages. There are the first 60 pages, I think,
I did. I was skimming through it. It's 161 acts of racketeering, all under the
Right.
first charge.
Right.
Yep.
And among the acts of racketeering include things that they describe my client, Stephen Lee, Reverend Stephen Lee, doing. And that is, he knocked on the door of a neighbor, is one of the charges. And then he knocked on the door of an individual, this Ruby Freeman, who was subject of a viral video that went out around the country when they were processing votes in Atlanta. They had kicked out people from the counting room, and some of the workers that remained that were part of the election authority. Some of them, among them Ruby Freeman, were involved with pulling cases out from underneath tables with tablecloths, and then appearing to run ballots through a ballot machine while nobody else was around. Mm-hmm. So there were people. There was a great deal of interest in Ms. Freeman, and my client, Mr. Lee, is accused of trying to do something to have Ms. interfere with Ms. Freeman's execution of her duties or do some intimidation things. It's all rather curious. That's interesting, because when they say 161 overt acts, like I said, Reverend Lee knocked on one person's door. He knocked on another person's door. Then he had a phone call with somebody. He never actually even had any real interaction with Ms. Freeman.
Yeah.
And so yet they're saying this is part and parcel of advancing this criminal enterprise.
Well, yeah, and I want to go back to the beginning, because I have a few of the acts, not even just Lee's, but just some of the things that they're trying to spin as overt acts of conspiracy and racketeering. And I have some of those, but I want to just start. So your client is charged with, under the RICO, as being a part of the criminal enterprise, criminal attempt to influence a witness, conspiracy to commit solicitation of false statements, and writings influencing witnesses. So first off, how is this a criminal enterprise? Explain that to me. How are they trying to argue that it's a criminal enterprise, and how does your client fit into that?
Yeah, that's a pretty fair question. How are they trying to do this? Which of course is astounding, because
again, and I hate to interrupt, but just to clarify too, because again, this is used, like, this kind of law that they're attempting to prosecute under is used for things like the Latin Kings, crime families, like people that go around, smash windows and say, I'm a window repairman, I'll do that for you, that kind of thing, extortion. But this doesn't seem like that. This seems a lot more like lobbying, and maybe it's an aggressive style of lobbying at worst, but still not a criminal enterprise. So what? Continue.
The basis is that at least the theory, apparently, from reading the indictment, is in fact that they were President Trump and the other 18 folks. And by the way, they mentioned that there's some 20 unindicted co-conspirators that are mentioned through the course of that they say known and unknown to the jury. So they say, that this enterprise was for the purpose of illegally overturning the presidential election in Georgia. And it's absurd, because as you mentioned, there are things they are saying that it was a criminal act in furtherance of this conspiracy to lobby the Arizona legislature to have hearings on the Arizona electors. That it was a criminal act for Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis to go to the Georgia legislature and present to the Georgia legislature the evidence that they believe of fraud in the Georgia election. Mm-hmm. And so now they're saying that lobbying the legislature is in fact a criminal action, right? Yep. They're also saying that John Eastman, one of the president's attorneys that gave counsel to the president, that they're saying because he gave counsel to the president on some legal theories, that somehow or other he was participating in an illegal act to overturn an election. So now they've made lawyering illegal. They've made lobbying illegal. They've made being on the phone call illegal. They've been making knocking on doors illegal. And this is problematic for them in any number of ways. The Georgia RICO statute, and we've been saying RICO, that stands for racketeering, influence, and corrupt organizations. Mm-hmm. And the idea there, as you mentioned, is to get organized crime that they're involved in either gambling or fraudulent kind of activities to either kill or hurt people and take their money. Nothing about contesting an election. And so the Georgia RICO statute has a definition of criminal enterprise, and then it indicates that people who are acting together for the purpose or common goal, and then they engage in 2 of these 40 kinds of criminal acts that are outlined in the statute. There's about 40. There's a list of about 40 different activities, from murder to theft, that are outlined in the statute as being what they call predicate crimes involved. And the way I read the statute, each individual on here, each individual that's charged, has to not only be involved in furthering the enterprise, but has to have been involved in committing 2 of the predicate crimes that are listed among the 40 in the statute. I've yet to see that. They don't, and if you read the language of the indictment does not track the language of the statute. The statute talks about predicate crimes, and the indictment talks about overt acts. Those are 2 different kinds of situations in the law. The law, when you're talking about an overt act, you're talking about a conspiracy, right? A conspiracy is something that you get together and people commit an overt act in support of the conspiracy. A RICO charge involves committing 2 crimes in furtherance of the enterprise. They're significantly different, and yet the language they're using in the indictment is the language of conspiracy. Why they're doing RICO instead of just a simple conspiracy is kind of important. For a RICO charge in Georgia has a statute of limitations that runs 5 years. Typically, most felony charges in Georgia have a statute of limitations of 2 years. So most of the things they're saying took place in November 2020, January 2021, somewhere, all of which is more than 2 years ago. So to try and charge any of these things as individual crimes themselves, the statute of limitations is likely run, in which case there's no ability to charge these individuals with any of these actions as individual crimes.
So that's why they're running it. That's one of multiple reasons I'd say they're probably running it as RICO, but that's the main one you believe?
That's the major one I believe, is to get around the typical statute of limitations.
Because I was also wondering on the idea of plausible deniability. If you were to charge people individually, one major criticism of Trump's indictment up in DC is the fact that there's an obvious plausible deniability because their entire burden of proof, as I understand it in DC, is the idea of saying is they have to prove that he intentionally lied. However, that's really hard to prove because you can consistently say that, well, Trump genuinely believes that the 2020 election was stolen. So there's kind of a plausible deniability in there. As with RICO, even just any of the acts, Trump could still be held liable for any act that anybody committed, whether or not he knew about it or he believed it was happening, whether or not any of that. Like he could be held liable for things that he didn't even necessarily know was happening.
Well,
am I wrong there, or
kind of? We'll back up to the DC case for just a moment. For just a moment on the DC case, they don't actually. They're alleging that Trump was knowingly lying, but he doesn't have to prove that he wasn't, right?
No, they have. That's what I'm saying. The burden of proof on the prosecution is that they have to prove that he knowingly lied, at least based on the way that it was written. The indictment.
And he doesn't, and they don't, and his defense doesn't even have to be that he believed he won. His defense only has to be that that it was uncertain who won.
Yeah.
That until we went through all the process, that it was uncertain who won. Be that as it may, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And as far as I'm concerned, is also going to be impossible to prove. And in this case, I have yet to see within the indictment the 2 predicate crimes that are necessary to pursue a Georgia RICO Act.
Interesting.
So it's because they can't do the conspiracy, and a lot of the other things are the statute of limitations has run or is about to run. And so that's, as far as I can tell, that may be one of the major reasons that they chose to do this. But the truth is sometimes, I think we were talking before we got on the air, that it's kind of frustrating to be a lawyer who believes in following the law, and the people on the other side are just making it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't have a rational discussion with somebody who is just making it up, and that they just made up things that they called, like I said, they called lawyering a crime. They called lobbying a crime. They called knocking on doors a crime.
They even called tweeting a crime. So
yes.
Several of the acts. This is one thing I found really interesting. Is so it sounds like a great headline for people that are obviously against Trump and the other 18 defendants, to say, 161 acts of racketeering, but you get to like act number 22, and this is just one of about, I believe, 7 to 10. I didn't count exactly of in which they list tweets. And this one says, on or about the 3rd day of December 2020, Donald John Trump caused to be tweeted from the Twitter account at Real Donald Trump. Georgia hearings now on OANN, One America's News Network. Amazing. And then they claim this was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. So him saying that there were going to be Georgia hearings for the court cases that he had pending regarding potential election fraud was an overt act of furtherance of conspiracy.
Right. And strangely enough, and they've got the whole fake electors that they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's always, ever since the founding of the Republic, somebody has sent alternate electors to Congress in the hopes that they would vote for them, or that they believe these electors were the real electors. And the jurisdiction to decide which electors to accept or not accept lies with the United States Congress. It has nothing to do with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that it was some sort of criminal act for Mayor Giuliani and Jenna Ellis to go to the Georgia legislature and ask the Georgia legislature to consider taking a vote and sending alternate electors than what had previously been, assuming momentarily if Joe Biden had won, they were asking them to take a vote and say that the results of the Georgia election are inconclusive or unknown, or because they were fraud, we don't really know who won for a fact. And they were asking the Georgia legislature to send their own set of electors. Guess what? The United States Constitution in Article 2 provides plenary authority to the legislatures of the states to send electors in any way, shape, or form that they decide to do so. So they were only asking the Georgia legislature to consider exercising authority that they have under the United States Constitution. It's utter insanity sometimes, Kevin. I just, we'll see how it plays out. I'm going to go back to, I want to mention one thing about Reverend Lee.
Mm-hmm. There was a few other things because I had a few other questions.
Sorry.
And so, I wanted to start off because like one thing that we touched on a little bit was the idea of this being a criminal enterprise. Is there a legal definition of a criminal enterprise? And then I want to get into some references.
It should have as its goal, as its purpose, to in fact ultimately wind up with a illegal outcome. Right.
Gotcha.
And Willis is asserting that they are trying to illegally overturn the election.
I see. Okay. So so Trump would obviously, if we were going to compare this to a real RICO case, then Trump would be like the mafioso, the Don or whatever. And how does your client, Reverend Lee, play into this?
Well,
I know you referenced some of the stories, but I just want to get deeper into those and how he plays into, and then also who he is.
Let's back up for one moment on Reverend Lee. And Matt, actually, back in November of last year, I was representing Reverend Lee. The special purpose grand jury from Fulton County, Georgia, had sent a subpoena to Kendall County, Illinois. for Reverend Lee's appearance and testimony before the special purpose grand jury. Now, people should understand that a state's authority to subpoena somebody and make them appear in court ends at the borders of the state. They can't enforce a subpoena after past the borders of the state. And so what is in place is an agreement or a compact between states to cooperate with having witnesses show up in other states' grand jury investigations. So they had sent a subpoena pursuant to that cooperation or interstate compact to Kendall County. And the other aspect about that is though that even though the states are joined together in this compact, the states actually have to enact laws themselves, and every state legislature tweaks these compacts a little bit, so the state laws are not exactly the same everywhere. And so they sent so Georgia sends this subpoena to Kendall County. Kendall County sends a summons to Reverend Lee. Reverend Lee and I get in contact. I read the subpoena and I said, this doesn't comply with Illinois law. And this is written originally by the Fani Willis team, and then followed up with a certificate of need from Judge McBurney, from a Fulton County judge. And we get before the judge in Kendall County, Judge Pilmer, and I explained to the judge, I said, there's differences between the Georgia law and the Illinois law. And I said, these people have not complied with Illinois law in order to have an order from you to enforce the subpoena. Ultimately, Judge Pilmer not only agreed on that point, Judge Pilmer said, based on what they're telling me, Reverend Stephen Lee isn't even a material witness. He is not even a material witness based on what they're telling me out of Georgia. And I am not going to sign an order for a subpoena ordering Reverend Lee to go to Atlanta. So an outside judge, based on what they told him, made a finding, an actual court finding, that he's not even a material witness, and yet now he's
indicted as being a part of the criminal enterprise, as they would say.
Yeah, that's the insanity of what's going on here.
Yeah. So who is Reverend Stephen Lee? I mean, it seems like he's obviously a member of the church in some way.
He's an ordained Lutheran minister.
Okay.
He has a congregation in the suburban Chicago area, and he's a regular practicing pastor as the congregation that he works with. But interestingly enough, Reverend Lee has got a really, really incredible career, because prior to becoming a minister, Reverend Lee was a special federal agent for the Naval Criminal Investigative Services.
Oh, cool.
He was an NCIS agent.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately became an ordained minister. And since then, he spent a good deal of his career as a chaplain for law enforcement, for different law enforcement agencies, various locations around the country, and in fact was chaplain to the NYPD during 9/11.
So this is a man who has served his country. He has served his community, and in some ways has gotten lightly involved in politics. Again, is not even really a material witness, and is now being targeted as being a part of organized crime by the Fulton County DA,
which carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison, and a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in prison. Conviction under these RICO statutes in Georgia is not even probationable. If you're convicted, there's a minimum 5-year prison sentence. And this, as you say, it's a man who has served his country, his community. He's been there. He prayed at Ground Zero with the first responders, and gave them the strength and courage they needed to work through that that situation. And as I said, he was a special agent for NCIS before he went to divinity school and became a ordained minister of the Lutheran Church, and now serves his community as a pastor of a Lutheran congregation in suburban Chicago.
Yeah.
And he actually was concerned. There were some concerns about some things that happened in Georgia. He visited Georgia, and there was a lot of things going on with Ms. Freeman, and he thought there might be some pastoral duties that might be useful for him to contribute in what was going on at that particular time. His belief that he could make some contribution as a pastor with law enforcement background has got him now indicted and facing criminal charges.
So how did he end up there? That's my question, because obviously that was one of the biggest acts that was listed that Reverend Lee was named in, was going to Miss Freed, I believe, knocking on her door, or was that simply the phone call? And so how did he? So was it by his own will, or was there what simply? And so it had nothing to do, no relation to any campaign.
He's never met President Trump. He doesn't know Mark Meadows.
So how does he get lumped? Like, I'm trying to figure out how he gets lumped into all this then. Because they're trying to claim that it's all connected. They look like the guy in the back room that's putting up like all these different lines of yarn trying to connect the strings. And so what is the connection? Because that would be what they have to prove in terms of pushing the idea of a criminal enterprise. I'm trying to figure that out. What's their argument? What's their angle?
I would call Fani. I wish I could explain to you what that theory is. We're developing defenses around the kinds of question you're asking. Because I think a jury is going to see right through this, but you're going to wind up with the sheer volume of 19 defendants sitting in a courtroom, and it's hard to imagine that a jury is going to be, as much as I love our citizens, and Thomas Jefferson said the jury is the best bulwark for freedom that was ever thought of by man. It's going to be tough for any group of 12 people to sit there for maybe a year or two, and then ultimately sort out the
each and every one of, because they have to go through
individuals.
That's insane.
Yeah,
I really. So that's what he's really is, and is that the biggest act that they're accusing? So I guess I'm probably never going to get a straight answer, at least not until it goes to trial. But I let me know if you can ever figure out how they're trying to connect him to this criminal enterprise, because, like, okay, I can understand Trump and Rudy Giuliani have a long-standing relationship. I can understand that connection. Trump and Mark Meadows, that's an understandable relationship that you can try to draw something onto. But a man who has never met the president, has understandably has no connection to the campaign in any way, simply did this all from his own will, was no connection.
I can tell you this, that there was some belief there was a lot of things going on relative to the country, and Georgia was ground zero for a lot of things during that period of time, and Reverend Lee seemed to think that he was in a unique position to perhaps make a contribution based on his combination of pastoral status and training and his law enforcement background, which gives him a unique perspective on the world.
Oh, absolutely, but in the whole scheme of the charges, it's like you said, he's not even a material witness.
The judge in Illinois says he's not even a witness, let alone. And that kind of tells you some of the problems that we're facing in the system, inside the system in Georgia. Because you had a judge that was overseeing the special purpose grand jury that sent what he called a certificate of need to a judge here in Illinois, and the judge in Illinois said, "What?"
Yeah.
That's it. And so that gives you some insight into the connections that are at work inside Fulton County. Because if somebody outside Fulton County takes a real look at this, they're going to do what Judge Pilmer did. What? You
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. So I just have just a few more questions.
Sure.
First off is, so in that video clip that I played at the very beginning, Fani Willis, um, announced that she said at the end of the video, "I'm giving the defendants the opportunity to voluntarily surrender no later than noon this Friday," or is that this Friday?
No,
No,
it's
next
next
Friday.
Friday.
Next Friday. I misspoke. Next Friday, the 25th of August, 2023. What are your clients' plans next Friday?
We're still working that out.
Hmm.
I'd have to tell you that we've made some approaches, and that's working out in detail. In a normal world, like this, what would probably happen would be they would transmit the warrant to again Kendall County,
Hmm.
and Reverend Lee would be able to show up at Kendall County, surrender there, post bond, get a court date on when he's supposed to come back. This is not when he's supposed to be in Georgia. This is
Hmm.
not a normal world. Because yeah, she sounds so generous. She's gonna give him till a week from
Yeah,
Friday.
we'll give you 2 weeks to figure out what your plans are, but
Yeah, and there's
yeah.
people from all over the country, many of whom are engaged otherwise, and she's given, like Reverend Lee. They're going to give him a week from Friday. If you turn yourself in, theoretically, then you wind up being arraigned. Perhaps even if you postpone, you might be arraigned the next day. Reverend Lee has church on Sunday.
Hmm.
You know,
And I wouldn't
so,
even be surprised if he has services Saturday night.
yeah, yeah. Well, he has
Yeah.
church on Sunday. Actually, I've been invited. I'm going to go speak to the congregation this weekend, and answer their questions about
Hmm.
what's going on. So what they've done to him in terms of the damage to a sterling career of a sterling American
Yeah,
is just, it's obscene. It's obscene. But
absolutely.
as I did respond to some things from the Atlanta Journal and from the New York Times earlier this afternoon, and I emphasized to them, Judge Pilmer, somebody outside Fulton County, another judge said he's not even a material witness,
Hmm.
and I think that's, and I've come to know some things about some of the other defendants. That I'm not really going to be in a position to talk about, but
Absolutely. I
there's
understand.
many of them in the same boat. Never connection, never met the president, never met Mark Meadows, never met Rudy Giuliani. I was in court with Rudy Giuliani in Pennsylvania in 2020.
Hmm.
I testified before the Pennsylvania Senate about what went wrong in the Pittsburgh area on election during the election period. Under the theories that have been espoused in this indictment, I'm a criminal too.
Yeah.
Because I investigated election matters in Pennsylvania, and then I testified before a Pennsylvania Senate committee as to what I observed in that, and that was asking the Pennsylvania senators to consider a situation about their constitutional authority in elections,
Hmm.
and based on what they've put in the indictment. And by the way, I was sitting at a table with Rudy Giuliani. So
I actually had the opportunity back in 2019. I met Rudy, so
okay, well,
down in
be
Florida. So
careful, man.
I know. Apparently, if you just talk to the guy one time or take a picture with him, you're a criminal, right?
You're certainly part and parcel of the criminal enterprise.
Maybe. I mean, I helped with students for Trump back in 2020, and so maybe I'll
Oh,
be the next one to be indicted. I don't know, but I did want to ask this one too. Is
sure.
so this is the only indictment against former President Trump that is, or of the big four that are currently out, that is in a state court. Some rumblings I've heard is that affects pardon power. Do you think that's specifically
But
strategic? Can you
I
talk to me
understand
a little bit about that?
sure, I understand your question on
Yep.
that. But second of all is, of course, he has pending case in New York State Court.
Gotcha. I thought the other three were federal, but it
The,
makes
Ne-
sense.
the New York case
Is
was
also
brought
state.
by the Manhattan
Gotcha.
District Attorney,
Hmm.
and that's
Gotcha.
got to do with business records.
Yeah, that's the falsification or that's the lying about the hush money kind of one.
that's kind of what the allegation has to do is
Yeah.
is business records. So, but that's a whole different problem, and again,
Mhm.
a made up charge. It's insanity to read these things. But relative to your question about pardons, the president has the authority to pardon people for federal crimes, crimes committed as defined by the federal code of criminal procedure. And then, but the president does not have any authority to pardon anyone for crimes that have been committed or you've been found guilty of in a state court. Those pardon powers typically belong to the governor of the state. And that's typical, but apparently in Georgia, that's not even true. Apparently, Governor Kemp does not have solitary pardon power. There's a pardon board that's created by, my understanding is the Georgia Constitution, of which there are 5 members, and the 5 members of the pardon board in Georgia vote on whether or not there be pardons. And so, so it is not even the governor of Georgia that has the authority, if there's convictions on these matters, to pardon somebody in a Georgia case. It is in fact the pardon board of Georgia that gets involved, and the president has no authority whatsoever. So, assuming momentarily that President Trump were to be elected in November of 24, he would
still be facing this in court.
Right.
He would still. Yep. Interesting.
He would not have the authority to get rid of this.
Yeah, and as from what I saw, it was just breaking right before we started this interview. Arraignments. Oh, good. You got a phone call there? All good. But arraignments were proposed for September 5th, as the trial date was proposed for March 4th of next year. Those are just proposals right now. Are those pretty much set in stone from the DA's office? I'm not 100% sure on the proceeding for that.
There is, they've got a RICO case. She's got a RICO case ongoing against some rappers in
Young Thug, I believe, is one of them, right?
Yeah. And they started the trial process in March. They have yet to pick one juror.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. So this will be a long, drawn-out process, especially with how many are in that RICO case? Do you know?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know. But that just
with
tells
19 people, though, and that means I'd assume 19 different counsels, at least for your defendants, plus the prosecution. That's going to be a long process, not only of going through honestly, the arraignments might be the easiest part of it. And then you'll have to go through all your jury selection, and that'll be in each and every one of your counsels. Is there going to be? I'm so interested in how this process is going to work out.
If in fact it gets to a jury trial, each defendant will have the preemptory challenges that are available to that defendant under Georgia law. Typically, peremptory challenges in many felony cases run from 7 challenges to 10. So there's as many as 200 peremptory challenges during the jury process on the defense side. And strangely enough, because the defense has 200, the prosecution will have 200. So they can get rid of jurors that they don't like very, very quickly. And then, of course, there's the whole situation where you can challenge jurors for cause. That is, if you indicate that they have a particular bias, if you can show that they have bias. And there's
and in a political case like this, I feel like that'd be consistent. I mean, your prosecution's going to argue that one's a Trump supporter, and then your defense will be arguing that one's a Biden supporter or a Democrat. So wouldn't that be the consistent argument? And then you'll basically be. And so if they're struggling to find one juror for the rappers case, gosh, how are you going to find an unbiased jury?
Yeah, no, they're going to actually have to find somebody that has been living in a cave, somewhere underneath in downtown, underground Georgia, underground Atlanta.
Yeah,
they have to find somebody in underground Atlanta that's been locked up in their storage room for the last 8 years at minimum. So it's going to be a huge headache just to get to a juror. But that doesn't count the various pretrial motions that individual counsel will have for their defendants. And until all those matters are resolved, there's not going to be a trial. So it's I'd be real surprised if it's on a trial court in maybe 2 years.
Yeah, it could be. This is going to be long. I mean, it could be, if Trump were to be reelected in 2024, this could go throughout the majority of his second term.
certainly could run into the midterm elections in 2026.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. And
on
so
the other
that,
hand, in the
Mhm.
meantime, in 2025, Fani Willis is up for re-election.
So
Um,
she might not even be presiding over this the entire time.
I'll tell you what, if the people of Atlanta, Fulton County, go, what the hell is all this? There's an outside chance this will ongoing matter would be going on, and she loses
Her
her
bid,
job,
and then it could all
and
just be dropped.
the new prosecutor there says this was stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also a possible scenario,
Hmm.
which is apparently among the reasons that she was in such a rush to bring it, because she wanted to get it over before her election. And that's what's so sad about this. In terms of, they've got an argument. My understanding is they're preparing an argument to recuse her, based on the fact that she's been trying to fundraise on this prosecution.
Yeah.
This is, so it's all clearly political. There's apparently her fundraising activities indicate what she's doing, and she promises to bring the evil guy to justice.
Yeah, orange man bad. It's the Trump derangement syndrome, and it's honestly, it's election interference at this point, and it seems like this DA might even be using it for personal gain.
Yeah, no, she's using it. She's using it for her campaign.
Hmm.
She's going to destroy the president for his campaign, and then using it to advance her campaign,
That's
which
insane.
is so sad, because from what I understand, there's basically 200 murders a year in Fulton County.
And this is what she's focusing her time on.
And this is what she's focusing her time on. And I
Absolutely.
imagine whomever is the candidate against her will make that point. So she'll have her own political battles going on while this continues. And it's also why she wants to have the trial done before her election comes up.
Yep.
But I don't see how that's anywhere
Near possible.
I can't see how that's anywhere.
And I can only, and I'm not going to say this is necessarily your strategy. It might be, but I mean, it would seem in the defense's best interest, knowing these externalities, to draw it out for the purpose of making sure she can't get what she wants.
That's your
Sorry,
that's your conclusion. I'm not.
Yep, I know you probably can't comment on that, but David, I really appreciate all your time. Is there any? I don't want to take up any more of it, simply because I know that you probably have a lot to work to do on this. But any other final thoughts about Reverend Lee or Trump in this case? Any expert opinions that you'd like to end out on?
I do. This is a very, people who cheered for this, I hope they understand how dangerous these precedents are that they're trying to set, how dangerous it is to criminalize an election contest, how dangerous it is for the end principle that's being sold here is that you have to take the results that the government tells you of an election without going through the normal processes to challenge it. This is extraordinarily dangerous for the country. And whatever danger people think Mr. Trump may or may not represent, based on whatever it is that they believe, this is so much more dangerous to criminalize contesting and acting and looking for the truth in election process. It's dangerous to criminalize advice from attorneys to their clients. It's dangerous for a local district attorney to try and usurp the authority of the legislature that the legislature has in terms of deciding who's an accurate elector and who's not, in terms of deciding what information to send to Congress. She's essentially also trying to usurp the authority of the United States Congress in terms of what the United States Congress has to do in terms of determining electors. This is so dangerous to allow this to stand, to allow this to happen. The people that are cheering this on, whether they like President Trump or don't, if they hate him for whatever reason they hate him, I hope they consider the consequences to them of destroying the legal underpinnings of everything that we have had, making us pretty successful for 240 years.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, David, for coming on today. I hope that you'll keep me updated with everything that goes on in this, and I'd love to have you on again when there's more updates.
Look forward to it, and we look forward to being in touch with our friends. I know you have a larger audience than that, but I'm always happy to be in touch with all our people in Central Illinois.
Thank you very much, David. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and good luck.
Thank you. Take care, Kev.
You too. Awesome, everybody. So that was my interview with David Shestokas, counsel for Reverend Stephen Lee, who is named in the Trump indictment in Fulton County, Georgia. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and learned something, because there's a lot at stake, and that's exactly what David was saying. This is a dangerous precedent being set, and I'm excited, but also cautious to see exactly what comes out of it. What did you guys think? What did you learn? Leave it in the comments. Let me know, everybody. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment, like I said, and share this with your friends so everybody can see exactly what is going on from the attorney himself, David Shestokas. Thank you guys so much for watching today on Speechless, The Daily Show.